With only 6 points separating the top and the bottom team in the South African Conference, let's have a look at all the fixtures every team is playing and who's most likely to come out top in the South African Conference. Welcome back to Skinnybru Rugby. So with only a few fixtures left, it's 4 rounds left. Who is going to top the South African Conference? This is how the pool currently stands. At the bottom, the Stormers with 26 points, and then after that, the Sharks with 29 points. Then the next 3 teams all got 7 wins. The Lions standing on 30. Above them, the Bulls and the Jaguares both on 32 points. The Bulls just leading because they have scored more points throughout the season. Interesting enough, that's probably all due to the first game they played against the Stormers, where they absolutely thrashed them, and that's probably why they have a little bit of a bigger lead in the season. So how does this predictions actually work? I'm gonna go on the 4 games each team has left. I'm gonna make a little bit of a prediction on if every team will win that game or lose it, or have a 50-50 shot at winning it. Then I'm gonna say those 50-50 shots, if this team wins or if this team loses, realistically what I predict, I'll add up the points and add it to the log. The log at the end will have its new standings as it would be after this next 4 weeks, and we'll have a realistic view on who will win the conference. But I'll also do another prediction on if those games that were 50-50 go the other direction, how the conference will stand. Obviously, it's just predictions. The Super Rugby is one of the most unpredictable tournaments, so it's not the easiest thing to do, but this is the teams that has the biggest shot of winning the conference. The Stormers' next few games, they're playing the Highlanders at home, then the Lions in Johannesburg, then they play the Sunwolves and the Sharks both at Newlands. Realistically, they should beat the Highlanders. They've never lost to the Highlanders at Newlands, especially after coming off form from that Crusaders game. They will be favourites to winning that game. Then the game against the Lions, they haven't beaten the Lions in Johannesburg since 2015. The Lions are a pretty strong side at home, so I think the Stormers will probably lose this one. They should beat the Sunwolves though in the next week's game. The Sunwolves are down and out. I can't see them actually having a realistic shot at anything, and I can't see them actually playing better anytime soon. The game after that against the Sharks, that's a pretty difficult one to call. They are at home though. Newlands is a bit of a fortress for them. They are stronger there. Earlier in the season, the Stormers did beat the Sharks in Durban, so for now I'll say the Stormers could win that one. So at the end of that 4 fixtures, the Stormers will be looking at 12 points more or less. Then it's the Sharks. They are facing the Lions at home, then the Hurricanes at home as well, and then they're traveling over to Argentina to face the Jaguares, and then to Newlands to face the Stormers. The next 4 games for them is not as easy to predict as it was in the case of the Stormers. The Lions in Durban. The Lions have won in Durban a couple of times in the last few years, but the Sharks did win the previous 2 games against them, including the game in Johannesburg earlier this year. So for me, I think the Sharks could win that one. Then it's the Hurricanes at home in Durban. I don't know how they'll do on tour because we haven't seen the Hurricanes on tour yet. But how the Hurricanes have been playing, they've been excellent. So I can't see it going any other way than the way of the Hurricanes. Then the Jaguares in Argentina, that's a very difficult game to play for the Sharks. The Jaguares play very well at home, and the Jaguares are in really good form. So I think the Sharks could expect a loss in that one as well. Then, as I said, in the Stormers' fixtures, the Sharks go to Newlands. It's difficult to beat the Stormers in Cape Town, and the Stormers have beaten the Sharks earlier this year. So I think the Sharks could see another loss over there. So in the next 4 fixtures, the Sharks maybe only 1 victory, so they could expect only 4 points from the next 4 games. Let's have a look at the Lions' next games. They are playing the Sharks away from home, the Stormers at home, the Hurricanes at home, and then the Bulls in Pretoria. It's also not an easy one to call, just like the Sharks' next 4 games. As I mentioned when I talked about the Sharks' game, the Lions could lose this one over in Durban, so they can't expect any points there, maybe 1 or 2 points. Then they go to the Stormers, they play in Johannesburg. The Lions is very strong at home and will probably beat the Stormers in that one. The Hurricanes next. As I said, it's very difficult to predict what the Hurricanes are going to do on tour, but they have been doing really well this whole season. They're hot on the Crusaders' tracks, so I think we could expect another loss from the Lions here. Then it's the Bulls in Pretoria. The Bulls are very strong in Pretoria at Loftus. They're one of the South African conference teams that are actually gunning for not just a playoff spot, but to go a little bit further and to actually beat a few teams in the playoffs. And the Bulls will probably need the win a bit more than the Lions, if you talk about them in that light. So I think the Lions could expect another loss in this game, but it's not that easy to call. So I think the Lions could expect only 4 points in the next 4 weeks. Then it's the Jaguares. I think the Argentinian team actually has some of the easiest games they could have in their last 4 games if you compare it to the other sides. Their first 2 games, the Waratahs and the Reds away, the Argentinians are very good on the road, as they beat the Hurricanes now in recent memory. It could be easier for them to beat the Waratahs and the Reds. Then they return home after that, where they created a bit of a fortress. They don't often lose in Argentina, to face the Sharks. The Jaguares are very strong contenders for playoff spots and beyond. They can actually gun to win a few or to beat a few teams in the playoffs. So they really should win this one if they want to go any further. Then probably the easiest fixture they could ask for their last week. They're playing the Sunwolves in Argentina. Usually between those 2 teams, the home team wins. So I think the Jaguares has the edge in this one, and the Jaguares have more to play for in this game. So for me, in the next 4 games for the Jaguares, they could expect 4 wins easily, to get 16 points. The last team we look at is the Bulls. They are currently at the top in the South African Conference, and it's also very difficult games ahead of them. 3 of them on tour, and 2 of those games are against New Zealand sides. Their tour games, the Brumbies, Blues and Highlanders. The Brumbies are at the top of the Australian Conference at the moment, so they will want to secure that spot by having a few more victories. So I think they could win this one against the Bulls, but it's not a definite. Then it's the Blues. They've never been the best New Zealand side. Their form doesn't suggest that they could actually beat the Bulls, who are in better form at the moment. So I think we could expect a victory for the Bulls. Then the Highlanders, they are stronger than the Blues side. The last tour game for South African sides, usually when we get to week 4, the South African sides do lose. History favors the Highlanders at home. It's not clear yet, but I think the Highlanders will win that one. Then we travel back to South Africa, to Loftus. The Bulls will face the old enemy, the Lions. It's never a clear-cut victory for these 2 teams. It's difficult to predict it, but since they're back home, I think they'll get a victory there. So the Bulls could expect 8 points in the next 4 weeks. So let's have a look at the current log again. Taking into account all the predicted victories and points that will be scored, and having no surprises on what I predicted, this is how the log would look. The Jaguares easily topping that with 8 points, having a little bit of breathing room over the Bulls. meaning the Jaguares could slip up a little bit and lose a game or two and still top the log. The Stormers just under them, they could find themselves having the 3rd spot and also getting a playoff position or a qualifying position. Likewise the Lions, if there is enough spots available. It's all down to how the other teams perform in the rest of the competition. Remember, the other qualifying spots, except for the number 1 and the wild card number 2, is all down to your points you score throughout the season. Then the Sharks will find themselves in the bottom and out of a playoff position. But if all these close calls go the other way, meaning if the Stormers lose to the Sharks at home, the Sharks beat the Hurricanes, the Lions beat the Bulls in Pretoria, etc. This is how the log would look. The Jaguares will still top the conference with a 4-point lead, a little bit smaller, but there's still a little bit room for error there. The Bulls only 4 points behind, like I said. Then it would be the Lions and Sharks in the 3rd and 4th playoff spots, and then the Stormers finding themselves in the bottom. As you know, this is all based on predictions that I make long beforehand. So if there's no surprises, the Jaguares look like favorites to winning the South African conference in both methods I worked out. But yeah, like I said, if there's no big surprises, the second favorites is probably the Bulls, and then the other 3 sides are all gonna fight for those playoff spots. That's it. I'm planning to do a few more of these type of videos for the playoffs and for the World Cup coming later this year. If you like the video, please consider subscribing, slap a like on the video so that I know you actually do like the content. That's it for now. Cheers.